everyone. This is Adam Mauser of Mish Men, and with me I've got Dusty Labar.
To your right.
To your right, or to my right, rather. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for downloading. We're excited to have you in the audience again. We hope you're enjoying it, and we've got a number of things. We just spoke to Abby, the intern, a little bit ago.
Abby, the intern.
And she is laying out a couple of things that she wants to start working on, including, drum roll, we're going to do a feature called Ask Adam and Dear Dusty.
Dear Dusty.
And there'll be little promotionals, but some so we can get some participation from you, the viewer. Also,
please go to our Instagram. You can click our link tree. You'll see that these T-shirts are now for sale on charliemikeapparel.com. So that our link will take you, the link in our bio will take you directly to that website, and you can order 10, 50, 100 of the shirts if you'd like. They're going to go quick.
They will go quick.
Phones are already lighting up. I've got a phone call right here already.
That's right, on line one.
On line one. I have 3 lines, so I could take up to 3 phone calls at the same time, so you better hurry.
Operators are standing by.
Operators. Oh, yeah, I miss those things. I miss those days. So what are we talking about today?
So today is Groupthink. That's what I'm going to start. Before I start off, one more shout out. We had our banner up here that we mentioned a couple episodes ago. I wanted to shout out to Daryl. I'm not sure if he's a listener. I'm gonna ping him and see if he is a listener. But Daryl from Minuteman Press was the gentleman that helped me get this together. He gave some good tips. So shout out to Minuteman Press and to Daryl there.
Thanks, Daryl.
All right. So like Dusty alluded, we're doing an episode on Groupthink. A lot of folks are familiar with it. It's not uncharted territory. But just wanted to dig a little bit deeper on it and talk about it. But I wanted to start off with the parable. It's actually a paradox that a guy named Jerry Harvey, he was a business management guy, consultant, and an expert. And he came up with this. He called it a paradox. It's not necessarily always related to groupthink, but there's a lot of groupthink attributes that are shared with it. So the way it goes, and a lot of you have already heard of it, but the way it goes is there's a family sitting in their town in Texas, and Abilene is the next largest city, and it's 50 miles away. But they're sitting there on the front porch, no air conditioning back in the day, and there's like 5 or 6 of them. And somebody brings up the idea about driving to Abilene to get some dinner. No one in the group really wants to go to Abilene because it's hot. It's a long drive. No air conditioning in the car, so nobody really wants to. But because of the kind of go along to get along attitude, conformity, consensus, none of the individuals want to go, but as a group, because no one wants to dissent, they end up driving to Abilene. They don't know this. They get to Abilene, they have their dinner, they come back, and then they start talking and realize that nobody wanted to do this. It was just this event, and so that's the kind of kickoff. I don't know. Have you heard of the parable?
Yeah, it's not exactly like it differs a little bit from groupthink, correct? It's not exactly the same thing.
Right.
But I mean, I think that the fact that it's a paradox, it makes sense. That does happen. You could use examples in everyday life where, I was just thinking as you said it, like if you were in the car with 4 of your friends and you were like, we can go to Texas Roadhouse, and you're like, I don't really want to go to Texas Roadhouse, but everybody's like, yeah, I guess we can go to Texas Roadhouse. Then all of a sudden you have 4 people at Texas Roadhouse and nobody really wanted to go it, but because somebody suggested it, it was just like a throwaway suggestion. Yeah. But because everybody's like, oh, maybe everybody wants to go, but you just end up going even though none of you want to go. Yeah. That's like exactly what popped into my head, because that does happen from time to time. Somebody will make a suggestion, and to kind of go along, everybody will just be like, oh, yeah, okay, that'll work. Sure. To not upset the group, basically. Right.
And you see it in a lot of, if there's more than one person, you got 2 people, you are now eligible for groupthink. So that's all it takes. 2 people. Two people. Generally speaking, it's going to be more than that. Yeah. About deciding what's for dinner, about where to go for this, that, and the other thing, and so that's what our discussion's about. So that's a good kickoff. There's some common types of groupthink. Okay. And so I'm going to list through them. There's a lot of overlap in them, so I don't necessarily agree with the list, but they're good starting points, and we'll kind of talk about these a little bit later when I'm going to give some examples, some famous examples of epic failures due to groupthink. Okay. So one of the things is illusion of invulnerability. So that group thinks they're invulnerable. Now, they don't go about thinking, oh, well, we're invulnerable, step one, so whatever we decide. It's just they severely underestimate risk.
Because they're part of a group?
Because that group of, hey, they look around the boardroom, let's say.
Yeah.
And they're looking around and making decisions. They've got to the point in their careers, let's say they run a business or they're managing a project. They're very sharp and smart people. They're very capable. They didn't get there by accident. They got there through hard work. And so there's that overestimating of confidence sometimes.
Sure.
And the underestimating risk. And there's a lot of overlap, if you recall our confirmation bias discussion. Not necessarily confirmation bias, that's a specific one. But the biases of cognitive nature that we have. So cognitive bias, there's a lot of overlap in what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Another one is collective rationalization. So the group will tend to downplay dissent. They'll tend to downplay risks and rationalize the direction that the group wants to go.
Gotcha.
Okay. Inherent morality. So there's a flavor of groupthink where they think that they are the moral center of that organization, and the decisions that they make are therefore going to be moral and just. And they overlook ethical concerns because the ends justify the means.
I think that one is probably something that's happened recently.
Yeah, there's a yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Stereotyping outsiders. So there might be some dissenting opinions, or there might be, hey, this other group, they tried this, but they didn't know what they were doing. So you stereotype and pigeonhole those folks as if they didn't try their very best to do whatever that job is. Pressure for conformity, and that can sometimes get a little bit ugly. That the group will pressure very subtly most of the time. They'll subtly pressure folks to conform because, hey, you don't want to be this jerk that's always complaining at meetings or pointing out that, hey, this will never happen.
Right.
You need to be on the team.
Right. Be part of the team.
Be part of the team. Because we're a family, right? Yeah. Self-censorship. So Censorship. So a lot of times you'll elect to not say something because you don't want to be that person that is dissenting.
Yeah, you don't want to be rocking the boat.
Right.
Yeah.
And last is mind guards, and that's outright where you have, you might even have a designated person. And I've been in a lot of organizations, and usually there's not, okay, Adam, you're going to be the guy that browbeats anybody that doesn't conform.
Right.
That's not the case. But what it is there's someone in the group that he doesn't brook any dissent. And so he naturally gravitates to be the person in the meeting, like, okay, we've heard your song and dance safety guy before.
Yeah.
We're about getting stuff done.
Sure.
And that other group, they didn't know what they're doing.
Right.
And so that mind guard will be the one that kind of pushes dissenting opinions away.
He kind of squashes it. Not necessarily the leader. He just squashes it.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times it isn't the leader. Most of the time it's in a group dynamic, and let's say a boardroom setting or a military setting, you have this chief of staff.
Right.
Who sets the table of the staff for the guy that's making the decision. In a lot of other organizations, it's called an executive officer or XO. Most of the time, a military organization, XO. But XO, chief of staff, kind of the same role. They're they make sure everything runs smooth for that meeting before, so that the boss can make a decision. And a lot of times he can strong arm folks, and he can be the mind guard unless he's done a good job beforehand to run all the traps of those decisions for that group.
Gotcha.
To where he can properly estimate risk.
Gotcha.
So, all right. So those are some general types that you could probably go on, but as you can see, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Any of those that strike a chord with you?
I mean, they all strike a chord. Inherent morality stuck out. I think I even said something about that.
Yeah.
one.
What do you think?
So like, I'll just use. I don't want to get too political or anything, but like, when somebody really they're like, we're making this decision in the best interest of everybody. We're helping everybody, so don't go against us. This is going to help you.
Yeah.
And that's something that happened like really recently. And then you know, if you were like, but what about, and they were like, no, you have to, have your best interest in mind. Don't even question it.
Maybe trust the science.
Trust the science. Yeah, exactly what I'm getting at in a roundabout way. And that I never thought about that side of the group think, like which makes sense. But like, then you have those people that will agree with those people then they jump on the bandwagon and they're like, you know, the normal everyday citizens, now they're part of it. They're like, yeah, you have to listen to these guys.
Right.
And now everybody's cheering for the same thing. But if you veil something under, I'm trying to save you, it's almost like you gave yourself a pass. I only did it to try to save people.
Right.
Which is a pretty, you know, horrible way to like maybe disperse medicine to people or do anything, like when you're like, just trust me, I'm just trying to save your life.
Right.
How do you argue that? I mean,
so it's interesting you asked that question because we've walked the dog. If you've followed the podcast for some time and you've listened along, you might see a trend. You might notice a trend that we're kind of going along. But if you remember the logical fallacies and the discussion about critical thinking, the appeal to authority immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
Where if I present myself as this authority figure and like, well, you have to trust me because I am the expert of this particular field.
Right.
And I'm only interested in your best interest, in your safety.
Right.
And your children's safety.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it's too complicated for me to explain it to you.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is appeal to authority is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves answers to questions that immediately affect their liberty and their freedom. Mm-hmm. Everyone does. So you can make all the recommendations that you want, but when it comes to my individual liberty, I'm the one that makes those decisions.
Yeah.
And it does not matter what your pay grade is.
Right.
It does not matter what authority you think you have. But in this country, we the people hold that power.
Did you read Jocko's book? It's the leadership book, Extreme Ownership.
I haven't read any of his books. I haven't looked into him too much. Okay. I know he's a very interesting character, but I haven't taken the time.
So it's just, I mean, it's a lot of it's talking about leadership, and like the best leaders don't just say do what I said because I said it. They explain to their subordinates or people underneath them. In the, you know, if they're not scientists and they don't understand, you explain it to them in a way that they can understand. You don't just say trust me, I know what I'm doing.
Right.
Because that doesn't really build trust with it. Maybe it'll build trust with some people, but if you really believe in it, you shouldn't have an issue explaining it. So that's kind of rings true because like when I hear like that's not a leader to me. Like don't be like just shut up and listen to what I say.
Right.
Because I said it. That doesn't even work with my brain. Explain it to me why it works this way or this thing works a certain way. The other thing I don't have to stand. The other thing that really jumped out was stereotyping outsiders. Like how many times in the past 5 years have you heard junk science?
Oh yeah,
probably 1 million times. Yeah. It happens all the time.
Junk science and fake news.
Yeah. So like somebody being like, well, that's junk science. It's like, well, how did you determine that that's?
Right.
Did you vet it? Like, did you actually vet it? Or are you just saying it's junk science
right.
because you don't want it to be true? And then you fast forward 2 years, and all of a sudden that junk science is reality.
Right.
And now we're just being like, well, put your hands up and be like, well,
we made the best decisions we knew at the time.
Yeah, we were just doing it for your best interest.
For your best interest and your safety.
But that's something that I laugh about every time I hear it is like junk science. Now there is some people that believe or say things that may not be true, but they're provable. You can't just say that's junk science and then move on and not really address it. That's not really like defeating anything.
Right.
Because that's how science works. Like you have one hypothesis and
you test it.
And then there's another hypothesis
right.
and then Isaac Newton thought a certain thing and then other people it's just the way that science is supposed to work.
Right. It's a series of questions. It ends up being a series of questions and they don't stop.
Right. You can't stop, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because once you think you figured things out, you discover that all things are irrational. Like most things fall under this rational A to B, B to C, C to D, on it down to N.
Well, right? Who was I'm going to screw it up and I'm going to sound stupid. Who was the very famous astronomer that was like, the sun is the center of the galaxy and everybody was that Copernicus?
Yeah, Copernicus. And then Galileo had the competing thought.
And they were like, he's like, it's the center of the universe. And everybody's like, you're an idiot. You don't even know what you're talking about. We're the center of the universe and everything rotates. But that's how science works. He was able, people can prove a hypothesis.
Right.
And be like, he wasn't wrong. So it's a, it can track back that far. Like you have to have hypothesis, and people say they can be wrong. People can be wrong. I think scientists have to be wrong.
Yeah, right.
That's how they figure it out.
Yeah, and the whole idea of this and this theme that we're going down is we even need to question ourselves. There are times and places perhaps where a decision needs to be made because time is of the essence. Mm-hmm. And like the example you had about that Jocko gave about the leadership, that the best leaders explain, this is why we're going to do this. And what that does is it builds trust.
Yes, exactly.
And you encourage discussion. You encourage dissent. Like, well, what about this? That's an assumption that might not be true. And a good leader has that confidence. And what it is a measure of the amount of confidence you have as a leader to make those decisions, if you're willing to accept those kinds of questions. But that trust gets built over a period of time,
right, to
the point where now when time is of the essence, and if that leader is found worthy to be trusted, to be followed, when he says, we go now.
Yeah, we don't have time for this, yeah.
And then he can go now. But in most cases, you can't constantly say, you have to trust me because time is of the essence before people get burnt out. They're like, you know what? Everything you said has been false, demonstrably false.
I heard somebody talk about this the other day, and it was an interesting thought. Just maybe this is tied into it, but there were a lot of people on both sides of both sides of the line. When they were like, this, we don't know, like coronavirus, we don't know how bad it is. We're not sure, but we need to do X.
Yeah, flatten the curve,
or we need to do, and a lot of people were like, okay, well, I can get on board with this for 2 weeks. Let's see what can happen. And then when you come to find out that like they weren't being, you don't have trust in them. They weren't doing what they were saying they were going to do. It wasn't just 2 weeks. Now it was like, as long as we want. Now we have to do all this other stuff.
Right.
And somebody was bringing up the point that even those people that initially were like, yeah, we should listen to what they're saying. They're doing something that if something came along that was possibly worse than the coronavirus or way more deadly, that people would be like, okay, we're going to lock down for 2 weeks, that people would be like, get out of here with that. So you, like you're saying, you've lost all your trust.
Right.
So people that did trust you, now they don't. And you have this huge group of people that are like, nah, that's not the way it worked last time, because you've lost all your trust. So you don't have any bargaining with them. No. You can't even prove to them that you made the right decisions in the past. Which I thought, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, what if something did come out and they were like, listen, we got to do this, and everybody's like, get out of here with that nonsense.
Yeah, because it's demonstrably incorrect. It did not work. Nothing that they offered up worked.
So that was something interesting that I thought about, because you can literally, now you have a bunch of people on the other side, they're going to be like, we're not, good luck. You're going to have to bring all you got to stop it. Yeah. We're not staying inside this time, or whatever it may be.
Right.
You've lost all your trust, all your credibility.
Which it's been a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I would argue.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
All right. So a couple of, we don't have to go through all these, but some of them have been pretty interesting. And most of you already, the listener have already heard a lot of these before, but some epic failures due to potentially groupthink.
Okay.
Now, disclaimer, I'm not going to attribute any motives to any of the failures, because there could have been other factors in there. There could have been reasons that are not revealed to us, that there was some sort of group conspiring to do some other thing.
Okay. It's
just the facts as we know them, that just are readily available, that there were things that happened, a decision was made, and it was pretty obvious that it was probably groupthink that led down this path. So no attribution of motives. That's a fallacy, right?
Okay.
Bay of Pigs invasion.
Okay.
Famous invasion. There was an attempt to invade Cuba and chase out the communist Castro regime that had just overthrown the government that they had in place. It was made by a small group of advisors to President Kennedy, and they failed to consider alternative perspectives. They went, and it just turned into a debacle.
Okay.
It was a mess. I don't know. How much do you know about Bay of Pigs?
I've heard it talked about. Now I feel bad because I've heard it talked about a million times. Like everybody's like, this is exactly like the Bay of Pigs. This is like the Bay of Pigs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't know a lot about it. So could you explain it a little bit more? Yeah.
So Castro had just taken over.
Right.
And with the help of Che Guevara, that's another topic altogether. But they took over Cuba, and they had a lot of backing from the Soviets.
Right.
We, the U.S., way underestimated the response of their military. We didn't think that they were going to offer up much of resistance, and that was the underestimation of that risk, and so they, with the help of some Cuban nationals that had departed, and now they came along with the CIA and some military groups. They came to invade. It just turned into a mess, and And I think I'm not positive of this. I think it was the Bay of Pigs. That's where they were inserting themselves.
Yeah,
and they just got massacred.
Gotcha.
And so, just underestimating the response was the big thing. And those kinds of things, before you do a military operation like that, or a paramilitary operation in this case, one of the things is like, what's the enemy state? What's their likely course of action?
Yeah.
What are their 3 likely courses of action? And what are the risks associated with that? What's the likelihood of each one of those?
Right.
And what's our biggest risk? What's the risk that we would stay up at night? And that's the kind of question you have to ask yourself when you're making decisions like that. Is I can have a bunch of data points and a bunch of courses of action, all that stuff, but really, like when you go to sleep at night, what keeps you up at night?
Right.
And those kinds of things should be discussed in a meeting, not in a sense of just pearl clutching and feigning like, oh no, what's going to happen, and that sort of thing, but a legitimate concern about what you have. Because that's usually that's in your gut. Usually that's the thing that you really have to concern your with. And not everyone will agree with that.
Right. Gotcha. Understood.
So, Bay of Pigs. Another one is the Space Shuttle Challenger. That's a well documented because that was a failure of their safety and their relationship with the decision makers.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I didn't realize that this was an issue of groupthink.
Oh yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There's a friend of mine, Wayne. I won't say his last name. Hopefully, he's listening. He is a aficionado of aviation disasters.
Okay.
And he studied this a lot. He's talked to me a lot about this one. And I remember this when I was a kid. I was 16 years old, 1986. I was actually homesick from school. Of course, I'm watching The Price is Right.
Yeah. That's what you watch.
That's what you watch when you're sick and you're a kid in the 80s anyway. And of course the space shuttle's launching and we watch it go off, and that was the one with the teacher Christine McAuliffe. First time they're going to put a non-astronaut up into space, and we're watching it take off. My dad works second shift, so he's at home too. We're watching it take off, and then you just see it. It looked weird, and because the cameras are so distant,
right?
Such a great distance, so the resolution's not great, and it's the 80s, not LCD TVs.
Right.
CRT, cathode ray tube TVs.
Yeah, tube TVs. Yep.
And so anyway, you eventually you see it blow up, and you see the boosters. They're kind of going off, and it was just horrific. Well, beforehand there were these O-rings. And I'm going to make sure I get this right. Despite concerns about cold weather conditions, NASA engineers expressed concerns about the O-rings, which were known to be vulnerable to low temperatures. So it got cold at night.
Gotcha.
And there was concern. The safety folks brought this up. And due to pressure to launch, we've got to maintain our schedule.
Gotcha.
I'm sure you've heard that before. Maintain schedule.
Yep.
Maintain cost, maintain schedule, because we got to perform. And they were ignored. And those O-rings did cause a problem, and that's what led to the disaster.
Golly, I never heard that. It's very interesting.
There's a lot more details to that. I'm glossing
sure.
over a lot of stuff stuff I just don't even understand. But
Sure.
it was just really sad. So they lost all 7 members.
Yeah.
NASA did the right thing, and okay, well, we need to look at our processes and make sure that we're not suffering from groupthink.
Right.
That's what it boils down to. Invasion of Iraq. 2003, groupthink. So why did we go to Iraq?
Well, originally, so this is going to be, 9/11 happened.
Right.
Correct. And then we invaded Afghanistan first.
Yes.
And then, I was young when this happened, so then we said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And we had to go in to basically eliminate his chances of, because they had said that there was some data or something that there was actual nuclear weapons or something in Afghanistan or in Iraq.
In Iraq, yeah.
And then we went in and proved to be incorrect. There were
no weapons of mass destruction. But the concern was, that he had them, and then he would share them with terrorist organizations.
Right. You feel like they tied that all together, correct? Like 9/11 happened, we invaded Afghanistan, and then also we invaded Iraq.
Like 2 years later.
Yeah.
And it was because of the WMDs.
Right.
And, that's attributed to groupthink. Again, I'm not going to attribute motives of why that ended up being, but the bottom line is, without a doubt, you had folks that said there are weapons of mass destruction here.
Right.
There had to be.
Right.
There had to be somebody that said, I don't think there are because the data aren't clear enough.
Right.
And it's not, I don't have a high degree of confidence in the data that we do see.
Right.
And a lot of these decisions, they are hard to make.
Sure.
It's not like there's like, we have this piece of paper and there's a list of all the WMDs that Saddam Hussein has.
Yeah.
And then, it's clear to everybody that, where'd you get this? Well, he wrote it in his own hand. I have the following.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah.
It's information that's gathered through human interaction.
Right.
Data from maybe a scientist that might have escaped. It's hearsay. It's innuendo. It's like pictures of they could be.
Right.
Trucks going in and out of a hospital that wouldn't normally go in and out of a hospital. So all that stuff put together, then you, with some amount of confidence, you say, well, they have to be weapons of mass destruction. He's got uranium. He's got, he's got all the things that you would need. So at any rate, but attributed to group.
Yeah.
Financial crisis of 2008. So this was, I don't know how much you remember that.
Well, they were giving out loans to pretty much anybody at that point.
Yes.
For houses and people that couldn't afford.
Yeah. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they were giving loans to folks that were credit risks.
Right.
A lot of people with credit risks.
Right.
And then those loans, a mortgage. If I go get a mortgage, it depends on the type of lender I go to. That mortgage is I like going to one bank and they don't sell it.
Right.
But if I go through and then they keep it and I pay them.
Right.
And then at some point I'm off the hook.
Right.
I paid it off.
Right.
With interest. Lots of interest.
So,
but what they did in the past, because those were high risk items, high risk loans, they were taking the mortgage for your house, my house, and a bunch of other people's houses, let's say that were high risk, and they would chop them up.
Okay.
And distribute them out and package them. And the financial industry was accumulating those. And eventually, because they were high risk, not everybody made their payments. They defaulted on their loans. Well, now this stuff is infected the financial system.
Right.
And underestimating that risk, I'm sure there were people that were brooking dissent.
Yeah.
And here we are.
This is probably not a good idea. We shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. And now it makes it very difficult to get a loan to buy a house.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to jump through a lot of hoops.
There's a lot more paperwork.
Yes, a lot more paperwork.
Yeah. That which everyone loves, all the paperwork you have to do. That everyone reads very carefully.
Yeah, that's right.
Before you start signing and putting your initials down.
Yep.
I in my research, I thought, well, what about the Spanish Armada? Was that a thing at Groupthink? That wasn't necessarily Groupthink.
Yeah.
Because if you remember the Spanish Armada, they were this huge Spanish fleet of ships that went to go try to attack England.
Right.
And interesting thing, they underestimated. This isn't groupthink, but it's just still interesting. They just underestimated the British fleet, the resolve of the British sailor.
Right.
And what the Brits had were these fire ships, and it just completely just wrecked the Spanish Armada.
This is not the same because I don't think it's groupthink if you live under a fascist regime, but it's pretty clear that Russia underestimated Ukraine, right?
Perhaps.
Because in 2014 they took Crimea in a day, and they just laid down. Yeah. No.
I don't know. I'm not convinced that what we're seeing in the news is entirely accurate about what's going on in Ukraine.
I gotcha. Well, I don't think you can be either, but I think for sure it's going on longer than people thought.
It is going on pretty long.
Right.
But I'm not sure what their ultimate goals were. And that's the neat thing about history. It takes a while to sift out.
Yeah.
And once all the details come out, then okay, well maybe they didn't overestimate. Maybe they did. Maybe they thought it was just going to be this 30 days in and out. Not sure, but I think I will say that it's too soon to tell.
Sidebar. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Keep on. No worries. The last groupthink example is Jonestown, and I know you guys talked about in the other podcast
the Jonestown massacre.
The Jonestown massacre. Yeah. That's the quintessential groupthink. That has all the dynamics. That has some other dynamics. When we talked about the mind guards, and if you look at a group, they're obviously, in order to be so quick history. Not everybody knows this. So what happened? There was about 900 people that were part of this cult that Jones fashioned. Jim Jones. That he fashioned, and he formed this group of people as a religious organization.
That started in America.
Right. And then eventually they went to, was it Guyana?
Oh, was it there? I thought it was South America. I might be stupid.
Yeah, it was Guyana.
Okay.
Yep. And so
they basically set up a town there.
They set up a town, Jonestown.
Yeah, Jonestown.
And in 1978, they were there, and 900 people died in a mass murder-suicide event. And so how did they get there? It's not like Jim Jones starts on day one of creating his cult of like, hey, do you want to join my cult?
Right.
Sign this piece of paper here. You're going to turn over all your possessions.
Right.
And we're going to move to this Jonestown, and we're going to be ostracized.
Right.
Of course, he's not going to do that.
Right.
We don't know what his motives were, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But how did that many people get to the point where you're drinking, that we call it drinking the Kool-Aid? Well, that's where that idiom comes from, because that's how they had drinks that I think it looked like grape Kool-Aid or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was, that's, everybody drank this stuff. Either that or they were getting shot.
Yeah, they were even like, they had the parents, like, they were like on the loudspeaker, like, give your kids the drink first, and then you drink it after that.
Right.
So that they could literally, like, he had that much control over them that they were like, feed it to your kids first, and then you can go ahead and drink it yourself.
So how do you get to that point?
Yeah. The cults are an interesting thing, because I think it's an interesting thought, because I think you're taking people that are specifically looking for something. And this guy's like, whatever that may be, a father figure or somebody that like, it's a, whatever it may be. They're not like very sure. They're looking for something specific to like help them. And that the first time this person helps him, he's like, oh, this is the guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're telling your friends, and not every people obviously left, which is one of the reasons why that senator or congressman flew in.
Yeah. There was a congressman that got shot.
Yeah.
Killed,
well,
right?
they got off the plane and they were like, if this guy leaves with any information, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, because he's seen the dirty.
Yeah, so, but that's the whole reason it ended, because they shot that guy and they were like, "Oh, we're in trouble now.
Yeah.
Like it's all going to be over."
It just escalated.
Yeah. So, but it's one of those things where, you get into this group and then you think this guy is like the all-knowing or all-powerful or whatever he may be to you, and but a lot of times if you listen to like some people that have been in cults, they were looking for something. They were searching for something, and then somebody's able to like kind of group these people together, and then they're like, I mean, you hear some of these people from cults in general, not even the Jonestown cult, but they're like totally sold in. Like you hear them talking, you're like, what are you even talking about?
Right.
And then they're all banded together, and then some cults would be like, you have to never talk to your family again. They're like, yeah, of course. Why would I not do that? 100%. And then they're shaming other people that haven't done that yet. So now you're in the cult, but you're still talking to your family. Well, now we got to shame you until you do what we say, because we all have to do it this way.
Yeah.
I don't want to say like weak-minded people. That's not what I'm trying to say.
It's not.
But I think it's somebody. A lot of times you hear these people's backstories, like they were specifically looking. They had a bad experience in their life, or were sad or depressed or something, and then they were able to find somebody that gave them a little bit of purpose to live or reason to live, and then they're able to kind of, you get people so motivated, and then you have these basically salesmen selling the cult to other people. So not even the leader anymore. You have your disciples that are now selling it.
Yeah, the mind guards maybe.
Right, exactly.
And it's not dissimilar to what happened in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
So you had this charismatic leader,
right?
That he had buy-in,
mm-hmm.
And whether we're talking about Jim Jones or Adolf Hitler, they're kind of cut from the same cloth.
Yeah,
and they have enough following of true believers now that can be the heavy,
Right.
They can come in. They're the mind guards.
Right.
They're going to make sure that people are now conforming. And you can't brook any dissent.
Right.
You cannot do it because that would be questioning. And we're interested in our survival as a group, or our survival and your safety.
Right.
Because the government's coming and they're going to, in the Jim Jones case, this guy has all the dirt on us. So we gotta make sure that we protect ourselves because we have this goal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's couched in some form of morality.
Yep. And
you're right. It's not necessarily weak-minded people. I mean, it can be, but that's not the hallmark of it. It's if you've got buy-in and people make decisions, we all do this based off of an emotional decision, no matter how much we say, well, I'm more data-centric. But data are accurate. That's true. And not all, there's you can make decisions based purely off of data, but there's also a certain subjectivity of which data that are good enough to make your decision off of.
Right.
So there is an amount of expertise. So we can all fall prey to that. And that's why I always encourage folks, check your priors. Check your prior assumptions. Is that where did you get that information? Right. And I ask myself this constantly, especially the last couple of years. Because there are a lot of decisions that were made and a lot of information coming at us about things that we had to do for our own safety and our own children's safety. And I was asking myself, am I making the right decision ultimately? And I'm not going to go into details of that today. But ultimately, am I falling prey to groupthink?
Right.
And so anyway, and that brings it to the last thing, the last 10 minutes or so. Have you ever heard of a guy named Dr. Matthias Desmet?
No.
So Dr. Matthias Desmet, he's a research psychologist based out of Belgium. And he's not the guy that came up with this term, but he's getting a lot of cachet now.
Okay.
And he describes something called mass formation. It's also called mass formation psychosis. So we're going to look at it through the lens of what happened in Jonestown, because that's very easy. It's very concentrated about what happened there.
Yeah.
Because it was a very punctuated, very acute instance of what happened, mass formation. So mass formation, it refers to a psychological state of individuals when they collectively form a shared identity or belief system, often driven by a shared narrative or ideology. Mm-hmm. So those people in Jonestown, they were true believers of whatever Jim Jones was saying. And I don't know what he was saying. There was probably a lot of religious aspects to it. Mm-hmm. And he probably borrowed a lot of components of popular religions and the true Christian religion. He probably borrowed a lot of stuff and then modified a number of other things because it needed to suit his needs to do what he needed to do. So there's an emotional feeling component of that. Mm-hmm. And it involves individuals experiencing a deep emotional void or dissatisfaction that makes them susceptible to adopting a collective identity. So you have to have this emotional void that this group is now going to fill. And this individual, a lot of times, it's an individual that is now going to fill that void.
Right.
Symbolic belief system. So there's, through symbology, there's explanations of the goings-on, of the things that, these are the things that we need to suit to achieve our goals or to achieve the goal of our fearless leader. Mm-hmm. And it's all based off of like a symbology type thing because you want people to grasp it easily. It can't be complicated.
Yeah.
There's a stage called emotional intensification where there's this urgency. We have to do this. Mm-hmm. That's probably how he got them out of the U.S. I think they were based in, Florida?
Yeah, I think it was Florida. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure now, but...
And then they found that spot in Guyana that mm-hmm. they could travel to. Well, how do you get that many people? I don't know if they departed with 900. Or they had like 1,000.
People just kind of showed up.
Yeah. So like, how do you get that many people? Just under 1,000. How do you get that many people to move out of the U.S. into Guyana?
I think a lot of occult leaders do a good job of giving an existential threat to these people. So like, these people are going to try to. They want to stop us from believing or doing whatever we're doing, which is the righteous thing to do.
Right.
And so and I know when they shot that congressman, they're like, look, do you see they're sending the government here to try to stop us, to try to get us. Do you see? And so it's a lot easier. Like you're following somebody, but he's also just posed an existential threat to your beliefs. He's also like, they're also trying to stop us right now actively.
Right.
So we have to get out of here. So everybody's probably like, oh, well, we have to go immediately.
There's that sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Confirmation bias. That's one of the attributes of mass formation or mass formation psychosis. We talked about that last week. Suppression of dissent. That's what we're talking about this week. Amplification of fear. So this is exactly what you were talking about. Hey, the congressman's here.
Yep.
They are going to send troops if he gets back with this information. We have to take action and get rid of him. He can't.
Right.
And you know, like if that guy would have came back, there would have been soldiers sent down there.
Yeah, for sure.
Like immediately.
Yeah.
And then you have influential leaders. So you not only have Jim Jones, but there's probably a cadre of folks, his trusted advisors, that he got to be his mind guards, and they were the ones kind of shepherding any dissent, and they were the heavies because 900 people, one guy cannot like actively go around and shoo people away from bad ideas or ideas that are not his. And so you have to have this cadre of folks, and it's almost like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
There's one guy that really knows what he's doing, kind of, and then there's a bunch of other folks that are true believers, and they're promised glory on the other side of whatever it is that they're trying to get to.
If you listen to any documentaries on Scientology, they do a very good job of that.
Yes, they do.
They do a very good job of exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Now they're probably going to be after us.
Well, that's okay. I'll take them on. They all seem like a bunch of wussies.
So mass formation, that's an interesting study. And if you've never heard of Matthias Desmet, research him.
I'm going to look him up.
He's got a lot of good information. What he did was he studied a lot of these cults. He studied Nazi Germany because he had his own mind. Like, how did they get to this point?
Right.
A lot of folks think that it was just the soldiers and that were, like the SS or whatever and Adolf Hitler that were attacking the Jews.
Right.
It was the nation of Germany.
Right.
And there's a very telling photo of little boys throwing rocks and an adult woman chasing her down the street. And you can see this woman in fear just running because these little boys are 14 and 15 throwing rocks. How do you get to the point where the culture is like they're ostracizing and actually trying to cause physical harm to a person just because they don't like her?
Right.
How do you do that? Well, it's through mass formation.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how you do that. And there is a lot of study on it. He's kind of encapsulated a lot of it, and he's an interesting guy. I'm going to be reading much more from him. Are you familiar with? Now the name escapes me, but there's I'll post it on as part of this. I'll get Abby the intern.
Okay, perfect.
To do this, but there's where papers and that sort of thing can get published and where anybody can read them.
Yeah.
And you don't have to rely on peer reviews and that sort of thing. And you also don't have to rely on the media to spread it because the media has been found to be at least suspect on what they tell us.
Sure.
So I hate to like inform this group here that I don't trust the media, but I don't. That's why we're here at the podcast.
Yeah, we're the new media.
We are the new media. So anyway, I don't know. What'd you think of Groupthink?
It's interesting. I mean, it's very interesting because you can see it happen a lot throughout history. Even like you're talking about Nazi Germany, as people look back and be like, that could never happen again. That is crazy. But like Hitler tied it around to like also something that's, rings home to us as like national pride.
Yeah. He
was like, we need to rise up and like restore Germany to its former glory. And so all of a sudden you have all these patriots basically are like, we need to do what this guy says. He gets it. So, that's an interesting thought when people say like stuff like that can't happen again. It's like, it happens maybe not to that scale right now. But I mean, people fall into that trap all the time.
Yeah. How could you get to the point where individuals are now ratting out their neighbors about what it is that they're doing?
Yeah. I mean,
And I think we've seen it.
Yeah, for sure.
We have seen it.
Yeah.
Maybe not to that degree. Yeah. We're putting people in concentration camps, although that was tried in New Zealand and Australia.
Yep.
Over COVID.
Yeah, they've failed on that one.
And for sure, we've seen it attempted. And be watchful of that. That's all I'm going to ask is do your research, your own research. Don't rely on what the man on the TV says. Yeah. And do your own research and always be guarded and check your priors.
Yeah, and it's okay to go against the group sometimes. You have to. If you don't think it's true, you have to
this might come as a shock, but I kind of fall into that category of the guy that's always suspicious of a group.
Well,
if there's a group and everyone's like, yeah, we're going to go do this, I'm like, oh, well, automatically, I don't like that idea automatically because there's a group doing it.
Yeah, you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. You're like, we just want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. You're like, I don't think so. There's 1,000 other places besides Chuck E. Cheese.
If you look at my weird life and my life decisions that are very obvious, it's like, okay, this guy thinks different.
Yeah, he's the opposite.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, Dusty.
Very fun. Thank you.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
I enjoyed doing a little more research on it. It's a topic that I've enjoyed just studying and just informally. I'm no expert, but I can read just like the rest of you. So I encourage you to do it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we would enjoy that feedback from you about what you thought of Groupthink.
Yep.
So
And don't forget about our T-shirts. Go on to our Instagram.
buy our T-shirts.
Please.
Shame your relatives that don't have a T-shirt.
Yeah, or only buy our shirts for Christmas this year and give them out as presents. That's fine as well.
Just ignore the whole groupthink aspect that we talked about, and everybody get a T-shirt.
Everybody needs to do it. Listen to what we're saying.
Because we're going to buy some land in Guyana.
And we're doing it for your benefit.
Yes, for your safety.
Yeah, for your safety, for your well-being. That's
right.
why we're doing it. So,
100%.
Yeah, that's a good way to tie it in.
All right, well, we will see you all next week.
See you guys next week.
All
Bye.
right, bye.